Our goal is to hook up all the wires to our Raspberry Pi so that we can power it on and begin our first project, Hello World. In order to get that done, we're going to have to do a couple of things. A lot of people have issues getting all of the different wiring plugged in. So here's a step-by-step troubleshooting method that will help you out. First thing you should ask is my computer tower on? Not just the monitor, which is what you're looking at right now, but is the tower behind the computer still on? If it's not, turn it on. Step 2, is your switcher on PC 1 or PC 2? So if you go look at the little silver box over here, this is called a switcher, and you want to make sure that by clicking the button it's either on PC 1 or PC 2. We have PC 1 default set to the tower, where PC 2 will be where the Raspberry Pi will get connected over here. 3, are all of the peripherals, which is a new word, plugged in? And I'm going to go over that right now. And finally, is the SD card inside your Raspberry Pi over here fully plugged in? Now you notice it does stick out a little bit, but you want to make sure it's fully plugged in and plugged in the right way. If you can't see the color, it's plugged in the wrong way. This is the bottom of the case. These are the feet, and this is the little vent. It should be on the bottom where you see the red and yellow over here. That's where I have flashed the operating system, so that you're able to actually power it on. If it has no operating system, nothing will power on. Okay, so those 4 steps. Those are your troubleshooting flowchart steps in order to make sure it's turned on. Now let's briefly talk about peripherals, and we'll talk about this switcher over here. So what is a peripheral? A peripheral is an auxiliary device, which is like an input-output device. So think of some sort of physical object, where when you click it, if I were to click this mouse over here, let's say I were to drag it over here, if I were to click this input, then some output would happen. You'll notice that this got selected, and then if I input the move, then the thing on the screen outputs. So some sort of input, I click, and then something happens over here. So these peripherals, these input-output devices, give computers additional functionality, but they're not essential for the computer to perform the basic tasks. Now, if I were to take the USB receiver, which we'll go over in a second, out of my computer, my mouse, I would move it around and it wouldn't work. But my computer is still on. It's not needed, this is not needed for the computer to work, to function, but to perform the tasks that we know and love, we need these peripheral devices. They enhance the user experience. So an example of a peripheral is a USB or Universal Serial Bus. And USB is what you guys are usually using to plug in to charge your iPads, where we see that like these cords over here are the USB Universal Serial Buses, and then this port over here is a Lightning cord that is using for Apple. Now that's one type of peripheral device that is used to input and output. In this case, we use this to charge or to connect other things, such as connecting a non-wireless mouse or connecting a non-wireless keyboard to our device over here. And in our case, we will be plugging into that Universal Serial Bus. We'll be plugging in a cord that will allow us to connect our mouse and our keyboard to the Raspberry Pi. But to do that, you guys are using a computer, and we are going to be using this switcher. And in the switcher, in the back of the switcher over here, we have a USB port that's going to be connecting to your Raspberry Pi. That connection is what's going to allow the mouse and keyboard that's both plugged into your PC and Raspberry Pi to function. So when you click on the switch, it'll work on both computers. So USB is an industry standard that allows specific like cables and connectors and protocols for connection, communication, and power supply between computers, peripherals, and other computers. Essentially, it connects stuff that you need. Other examples of peripherals are digital cameras, a joystick that you could plug in to move to do a particular game. If you wanted to plug in something along the lines of the microphone that I'm using to talk over here, this via USB is plugged into my computer, which is what's allowing the particular sound quality. It's enhancing it. There's a built-in speaker, but this one has even better. There's a lot more like a printer, speakers that I can go over, but the idea is that these are things that you plug in to enhance the experience of a computer, and it's called a peripheral. And unlike a computer, it is not capable of operating by itself. You'll notice that, for example, this microphone, if I were to unplug this cable over here, the power supply that's going to it is coming from the computer, and this light would turn off. It cannot function without it. If I unplug the mouse cannot function. It is required to be connected to the computer over here. So why are the keyboard and mouse specifically a peripheral? Well, they are able to run, like I just said, but not required, which is why they're considered peripherals over here. You also, by the way, sometimes I can control the computers in the room with my computer over here. That is, I don't need the computer that has your peripheral, your mouse and keyboard plugged in. I can access it remotely, which is kind of cool. Why also do they come with a computer? Well, when you buy it, it generally comes with a keyboard and mouse, sound card, power plug. It may include a monitor. These are things that enhance it, but are not necessarily required. Your computer, like a Raspberry Pi, actually has no monitor. It can turn on, it could be powered, but it doesn't have access to a monitor until we plug that in, and our monitor is going to be plugged in via an HDMI, which I'm going to go over in a second. So these peripherals are usually wired, USB, Lightning, like I just described over here. And there's some other ones that are more old that you don't probably know. But you do know a lot of the wireless peripherals, like Bluetooth over here, and Wi-Fi, which is somehow how things are connected using to your iPad. Even hearing devices are connected via Bluetooth if you have one of those. So these are also peripherals. Now, I mentioned earlier HDMI, which is called High Definition Multimedia Interface, HDMI. And these HDMI cables are going to be what are we using through the switcher over here to connect to our Raspberry Pi via a HDMI cable over here. In this case, you'll notice that it is a very small port. These are called micro HDMI. In other words, a smaller high definition multimedia interface over here, and they're generally used for high quality bandwidth streams for audio and video, and they've replaced the old stuff, making it easier. The old stuff, these composite cables, there used to be 3 cables that were used for audio and video, but we now only need to use one. We've been able to consolidate that into one single high definition cable over here. But before we consolidated to these cables, we used to have these blue VGA cables, which we still have. These blue VGA cables are what's plugged into all of the computers over there. So the reason we need this switcher over here, and there's so many wires, is because our monitors don't have HDMI ports. They only have video graphics adapter, these blue VGA cables over here that come with these 15 pins over here. They're used for this old solution to get resolution before, we came up with a better way over here. But this was the way that we were able to interface and connect a wired monitor to a computer so that you're allowed to see the graphics part of it. So how it works, which we're not going to get too much into, but you'll notice that there's a lot of these little pins over here in the VGA cable, and each of these 15 pins actually stands for a particular thing. Each hole has its own function. So the functions are, 1 is the red video, 2 is the green video, 3 is the blue video. So if your cord is loose, you might notice your screen is yellow. It's because the pin that stands for the particular color of that video is loose, and we need to push the 2 little pins over here up and righty-tighty screw them in, which I often do with my little device, which is sometimes why your computers are not working. So you want to make sure these VGA cables are plugged in so you have access to your graphics over here. So those are basically the key functions, and that's the video over here. So we're going to be plugging in via wires to these switchers over here, USB cables in the front to connect your peripherals, your mouse and your keyboard, and in the back we have HDMIs with adapters to connect to these VGA blue cables so that you have visual connection. And easily via the switcher we can click on and off, and you'll be able to use your mouse, your peripheral, and keyboard for both Raspberry Pi and for computer. That's it for this video. I know that was a lot. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace!